Yeah, I mean, I think like following the game, it's so disappointing to lose, and most seasons end on a loss, so it's really hard and challenging. But
What just happened between Lexie Hull and Breanna Stewart didn't just shock fans. It may have just exposed a side of the WNBA we've never seen this clearly before. Because this wasn't just another hard play. This wasn't just basketball being basketball. This was personal. And it all goes back to one moment, the collision involving Sophie Cunningham that had the entire league arguing about one thing. Was it just physical play, or did it cross the line? Some people said it was completely legal, just toughness at the highest level. Others? They called it reckless, dangerous, and the kind of play that puts a target on your back. But here's where things escalated. Because when Lexie Hull stepped onto the court after that incident, she didn't just come to play. She came with something else. Energy, tension, and a message. And the moment she got matched up with Breanna Stewart, you could feel it. One possession, one collision, and suddenly everything stopped. Because Hull didn't walk away. She stepped forward, locked eyes, and let Stewart know, without saying much, this isn't going to happen again. That moment? It wasn't loud, but it was powerful. Because in that second, the entire tone of the game shifted. And now fans are asking, was this just emotion in the moment? Or the start of something much bigger? Because if this is how players are responding now, then what we're about to see next in this league might change everything. To really understand why that moment between Lexie Hull and Breanna Stewart felt so intense, you have to zoom out. Because this didn't start with that stare. It didn't even start with that game. It started with a shift that's been building across the entire WNBA. For years, the league has been evolving, more talent, more attention, more pressure. But recently, that evolution has turned into something else entirely. Something faster, more emotional, more physical, and a lot more personal. Because what you're seeing on the court right now isn't just basketball. It's identity. It's pride. It's players fighting not just to win, but to be respected. And when you add in a new wave of stars, players bringing millions of new eyes to the league, everything gets amplified. Every foul, every reaction, every moment. Nothing is small anymore. And that's exactly the environment this situation happened in. Now let's talk about the moment that lit the fuse. During a heated matchup, Breanna Stewart, one of the most dominant and physically imposing players in the game, set a screen on Sophie Cunningham. To some, it was just a hard, competitive play. The kind you expect at the highest level. But to others, it looked different. It looked like something that crossed a line. Because the impact wasn't small. Cunningham went down hard. And suddenly, the conversation wasn't about the game anymore. It was about intent. Was that just physical basketball? Or was it something more aggressive? More targeted? That debate? It didn't stay on the court. It spread everywhere. Social media, sports shows, locker rooms, players themselves. Everyone had an opinion. And once that conversation started, it didn't stop. Because moments like that don't just disappear. They stick. They get replayed, analyzed, remembered. Especially by players. And that's where things start to get serious. Because in today's WNBA, players aren't just competing. They are watching. They are remembering. And most importantly, they are responding. There's an unspoken rule that's starting to take shape. If something happens to your teammate, you don't forget it. You answer it. Maybe not immediately. Maybe not loudly. But eventually, you respond. And that's exactly where Lexie Hull comes into this story. Because Hull isn't the type of player who dominates headlines. She's not the one scoring 30 points or leading highlight reels. But what she is known for is something just as important in moments like this: toughness, awareness, and loyalty. She's the kind of player every team needs, but doesn't always get recognition for. The one doing the dirty work. The one guarding the toughest matchups. The one stepping up when things get physical. And in a league that's becoming more intense by the game, that role is becoming more important than ever. Now add one more layer to this. Hull plays for a team that's young, hungry, and suddenly under the spotlight. With players like Caitlin Clark bringing massive attention to the Indiana Fever, every game isn't just a game anymore. It's an event. And with that attention comes pressure. Pressure to perform. Pressure to compete. And pressure to protect your teammates. Because when the spotlight gets brighter, so does the target. And players know that. They feel it. So when that incident with Cunningham happened, it didn't just stay in that game. It became a message. A warning. A moment that every other team, and every other player, paid attention to. And you can bet Lexie Hull was one of them. Because players like her, they don't ignore moments like that. They study them. They prepare for them. They wait for their moment. And that's exactly what made the next matchup so important. Because when Indiana faced New York, this wasn't just another game. This was a test. A test of how they would respond. A test of whether they would let that kind of moment happen again. Or whether someone would step up and draw a line. And from the very beginning of that game, you could feel it. The energy was different. More intense. More physical. More focused. Every possession felt heavier. Every contact meant something. And when Hull found herself matched up with Stewart, that tension? It wasn't hidden. It was right there. Building. Waiting. Because both players knew what had happened before. Both players understood what was being talked about. And both players knew that this moment was bigger than just one play. It was about respect. About control. About setting the tone. And when that collision finally happened, when they came together in that moment, everything that had been building, it exploded into one interaction. One stare. One message. That said more than words ever could. And now, the entire league is watching. Because what happened next might not just define that game. It might define what this new era of the WNBA looks like. The moment it happened, you could feel the entire arena shift. Because this wasn't just another physical play. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, whether they realized it or not. Breanna Stewart had the ball. She was doing what she always does, controlling the pace, using her strength, imposing her will on the game. And right in front of her, Lexie Hull. Locked in. Focused. Not backing down. You could already feel it building. Because this wasn't just defense. This was tension that had been growing since that earlier incident with Sophie Cunningham. Then it happened. A collision. Hard. Physical. The kind of contact that happens dozens of times in a game, but this time, it felt different. Because the whistle blew. And nobody moved. For a second, everything froze. And that's when Hull did something that changed everything. She didn't turn away. She didn't reset. She stepped forward. Right into Stewart's space. Locked eyes. And held it. That stare. It wasn't random. It wasn't emotional. It was intentional. It said everything without saying a word. Not this time. Not to us. You're not going to run through us like that. And in that moment, the entire energy of the game shifted. Because this wasn't just a reaction. This was a response. A response to everything that had been building. Everything that had been talked about. Everything that players across the league had been watching. And suddenly, this wasn't just Stewart versus Hull. This was about something bigger. Because when one player stands up like that, it sends a message to everyone else. And Stewart? She felt it. You could see it in her reaction. Not fear. Not hesitation. But awareness. Awareness that this wasn't going to be the same kind of game anymore. Because now, she wasn't just facing a defender. She was facing resistance. And that's where things got even more intense. Because Hull didn't back down after that. She leaned in. Played even more physical. Matched every movement. Every bump. Every push. And suddenly, every possession between them felt like a battle. Not just for the ball. But for control. Because that's what this had become. Control of the game. Control of the tone. Control of the narrative. And that's when the first twist hit. Because while everyone expected Stewart to dominate, something unexpected started happening. She adjusted. Subtly. But noticeably. Her movements changed. Her approach became more calculated. More aware of the contact. More conscious of the space Hull was taking away. Now that might not sound like a big deal. But in a matchup like this, it's everything. Because when a dominant player starts adjusting, it means something has shifted. And that's exactly what Hull's presence did. She didn't stop Stewart completely. But she changed the way she played. And that alone was a statement. Because it showed that this wasn't just about reacting to one play. This was about altering the dynamic. But here's where things get even deeper. Because the impact of that moment didn't stay between those two players. It spread to the entire team. To the entire game. Because when teammates saw Hull stand her ground like that, it did something. It gave them confidence. Energy. A sense that they weren't just reacting anymore, they were setting the tone. And suddenly, Indiana looked different. More aggressive. More connected. More willing to match that physicality. And that's when the game turned. Because now, it wasn't just New York bringing the intensity. Indiana was answering it. Every possession. Every contact. Every moment. And that's when the second layer of conflict revealed itself. Because now, this wasn't just about one incident anymore. It was about identity. About what kind of team Indiana was going to be. Soft. Or willing to fight back. And Hull made that answer clear. But here's the twist nobody expected. Because despite all of this, despite the intensity, despite the confrontation, the referees didn't escalate it. No technical. No ejection. Nothing. Which meant one thing. The players had to handle it themselves. And that's where things get dangerous. Because when the game is allowed to stay physical like that, when players are left to manage their own boundaries, the tension doesn't go away. It builds. And that's exactly what happened. Every play after that felt heavier. Every contact meant more. Because now, both sides understood something. This wasn't just basketball anymore. This was a message. And neither side wanted to back down. But here's the biggest twist of all. Because while fans were focused on the confrontation, something else was happening beneath the surface. Something quieter. But just as important. Respect. Because moments like that, they don't just create conflict. They create recognition. And even though Hull stepped up, even though she challenged Stewart directly, there was something unspoken in that interaction. An understanding that this wasn't random. This was earned. And that's what makes this moment so powerful. Because it wasn't just about anger. It was about establishing something. A line. A presence. A reputation. And now? That reputation is out there. for the entire league to see. Because once you show you're willing to stand up like that, other teams notice. Other players remember. And the next time Indiana steps on the court, they won't be seen the same way. And that's what makes this moment bigger than just one game. Because it didn't just change the energy in that arena. It might have changed how this team is treated moving forward. But here's the question that changes everything. Was this just a one-time moment? Or the beginning of something much bigger? Because if this is how teams are going to respond now, if this is the new standard, then what we're about to see next in this league might not just be intense. It might be completely different from anything we've seen before. Just when it felt like that moment between Lexie Hull and Breanna Stewart had already shifted the game, it didn't settle. It spread. Because what happened in that one possession didn't stay contained to those two players. It carried into every single play that followed. You could see it. Feel it. The game didn't calm down. It got heavier. Every screen hit harder. Every drive came with more contact. Every rebound turned into a fight for space. And suddenly, it wasn't just physical. It was emotional. Because now, both teams were playing with something extra. Something beyond just winning. And that's when the real escalation began. Because while Hull had already made her message clear, she didn't stop there. She doubled down. Stayed locked on Stewart. Matched her step for step. Body for body. And every time they came into contact, you could see it again. That same tension. That same energy. That same unspoken message. I'm not backing down. Now here's where things take a serious turn. Because Stewart isn't just any player. She's one of the most dominant forces in the league. The kind of player who's used to controlling matchups. Setting the tone. Making other players adjust to her. But now, she wasn't the only one setting the tone. And that changes everything. Because when a player like Stewart has to respond instead of dictate, the entire dynamic shifts. And you could see that shift happening in real time. Her movements became more deliberate. Her decisions more calculated. Not weaker, but more aware. More cautious of the space Hull was taking. And that's when the psychological battle fully kicked in. Because this wasn't just physical anymore. This was mental. A test of who was going to break first. Who was going to lose composure. Who was going to step back. And who was going to push forward. And Hull? She kept pushing. But here's the shocking reveal that most people didn't catch at first. Because while all the focus was on that confrontation, something else was happening behind it. The reaction of the Indiana fever. Because the moment Hull stood up like that, the entire team changed. Their energy lifted. Their confidence grew. And suddenly, they weren't playing like a young team anymore. They were playing like a group that had found its identity. Because moments like that, they do more than just send a message to the opponent. They send a message to your own team. They tell everyone, we're not getting pushed around. We're not waiting to react. We're setting the tone now. And once that mindset kicks in, it's hard to reverse. Because now, every player on that court is feeding off it. Every possession becomes more intense. More connected. More deliberate. And that's exactly what happened. But here's where it gets even more intense. Because while Indiana was rising with that energy, New York wasn't backing down. At all. Because for a team led by someone like Stewart, backing down isn't an option. So instead of calming the situation, they matched it. Play for play. Contact for contact. And now the game turned into something completely different. Not just a matchup. Not just competition. A statement. From both sides. And that's when the entire arena felt it. Because fans weren't just watching basketball anymore. They were watching a battle. One that had layers. history, emotion, and meaning behind every single moment. But here's the part that changes everything. Because as intense as it got, there was still a line. And neither side fully crossed it. No fights. No ejections. No complete breakdown. Which means something important. This wasn't chaos. It was controlled. Calculated. Intentional. And that's what makes it even more dangerous. Because controlled aggression? That's harder to stop. It doesn't burn out quickly. It builds. It carries into the next game. And the next. And the next. And that's where this situation goes from being a moment to becoming something bigger. Because now, every team in the league is watching this. Seeing how Indiana responded. Seeing how Hull handled it. Seeing how Stewart adjusted. And most importantly, seeing what works. Because if this becomes the new standard, if responding physically becomes expected, then the entire league changes. And that's not just speculation. It's already happening. You can see it in other matchups. Other players stepping up. Other teams refusing to back down. Because once one team proves it's willing to stand its ground, others follow. And that's how a new era begins. But here's the biggest question of all. How far does it go? Because there's a line between playing hard and playing reckless. Between intensity and danger. And right now, that line is getting thinner. Every game. Every moment. Every collision. And the league is going to have to decide. Do they let this continue? Do they embrace this new level of physicality? Or do they step in before it goes too far? Because if moments like this keep happening, if players keep responding like this, then what we're watching right now isn't just evolution. It's a transformation. And transformations? They don't happen quietly. They happen through moments like this. Moments that feel small in the moment, but end up defining everything that comes after. And something tells me we're only at the beginning of it. The moment that confrontation between Lexie Hull and Breanna Stewart hit social media, it didn't just trend. It exploded. Because now, everyone had an opinion. And just like that, the entire conversation around the WNBA shifted overnight. On one side, you had fans praising Hull, calling her exactly what the league needed. She stood on business. Finally someone said enough. That's how you protect your teammates. For this group, Hull wasn't just reacting. She was leading. Setting a tone. Drawing a line that they felt had been crossed before. But on the other side, the reaction was completely different. Because a lot of people were defending Stewart. And their argument? Simple. That's basketball. Physical play isn't dirty play. If you can't handle contact, you shouldn't be on that level. And just like that, the debate turned into something bigger. Because now it wasn't just about one play. It was about the identity of the league. Is the WNBA becoming more physical? Or is it just being misunderstood? Is this toughness? Or is it crossing into something else? And that's where things get intense. Because both sides have valid points. And neither side is backing down. Now here's where the industry reactions start to matter. Because when situations like this happen, players watch closely. And even when they don't say much publicly, their reactions still show. Subtle things. Post-game comments. Body language in interviews. Even silence. And that silence? It says a lot. Because when players choose not to speak on something like this, it usually means one thing. They understand exactly how serious it is. Now, some players did hint at their perspective. Without naming names. Without making it obvious. But enough to show where they stand. Some lean toward the idea that the game is evolving, that physicality is part of growth, that the league is getting tougher, and that's a good thing. Others? They hinted at concern, at the idea that things might be going too far, that there's a line that shouldn't be crossed. And right now, that line feels unclear. Which is exactly why this moment is so important. Because it's not just about Hull or Stewart anymore. It's about what happens next. Because if players across the league start responding the way Hull did, then every game becomes something different. More intense. More emotional. More unpredictable. And that changes everything. But here's the part that really has people talking. Because beyond fans and players, media started reacting too. Breaking down the moment. Replaying it. Analyzing every angle. Every reaction. Every second. Trying to figure out what it actually meant. And what they found wasn't a clear answer. Some called it a defining moment. A turning point for the league. Others called it overblown. Just another physical play that got too much attention. And that divide? It's what keeps the story alive. Because when there's no clear answer, people keep watching, keep debating, keep coming back. Now here's the biggest shift happening right now. Because the conversation isn't just about the play anymore. It's about reputation. About how teams are viewed. How players are approached. Because after that moment, Indiana isn't seen the same way. They are not just a young team anymore. They're a team that stands its ground. A team that responds. A team that doesn't get pushed around. And that changes how opponents play against them. How referees watch them. How fans react to them. And for Stewart, that moment adds something too. Because now, every physical play she makes will be watched differently. Analyzed more closely. Questioned more often. And that's the impact of moments like this. They don't stay in the past. They carry forward. Into every future game. Every future matchup. Every future interaction. And that's why this isn't over. Not even close. Because right now, we're in the middle of something. A shift. A change in how the game is played. And the reactions we're seeing? They are just the beginning. Because as long as the debate continues, as long as players keep responding, as long as moments like this keep happening, the story keeps growing. And something tells me, we haven't seen the biggest reaction yet. Just when it felt like that moment between Lexie Hull and Breanna Stewart had already changed everything, something even bigger started to take shape. And most people didn't catch it at first. Because while everyone was focused on the stare, the tension, the physicality, the real shift was happening underneath. Quietly. Across the entire league. Because after that game, players didn't just move on. They remembered. And that's what makes this different. Because in today's WNBA, nothing gets forgotten. Every hard screen. Every collision. Every moment of contact. It gets stored. Mentally. Emotionally. And eventually, it gets answered. And that's the twist nobody is fully ready for yet. Because what happened between Hull and Stewart? That might not have been the peak. It might have been the beginning. Because now, other teams are watching. Other players are taking notes. And they are asking themselves one simple question. If that happens to us, how are we responding? And once that mindset spreads, everything changes. Because now it's not just about playing the game. It's about protecting your team. Sending messages. Establishing boundaries. And that's how rivalries are born. Not through marketing. Not through headlines. But through moments like this. Raw. Unfiltered. Real. Now here's where it gets even more intense. Because if you look closely at what happened in that game, there was something else. Something subtle, but powerful. Respect. Because even in that heated moment, even with all the tension, there was an understanding. Hull stepped up. Stewart didn't back down. And in that exchange, something was established. Not just conflict, but recognition. And that's dangerous in the best way possible. Because when players recognize each other like that, the next time they meet, it's not starting from zero. It's continuing something. Something unfinished. And that's exactly what fans are starting to realize. This isn't over. Not even close. Because the next time these teams face each other, it won't just be another game. It'll be a continuation of that moment, of that message, of that tension. And you can already feel it building. Because now, every matchup carries more weight, more meaning, more expectation. Now here's the biggest twist of all. Because while all of this is happening on the court, the league itself is changing. Right in front of us. This isn't the same WNBA people were watching a few years ago. This is faster, more intense, more emotional, more competitive than ever. And moments like this, they are driving that change. They are bringing attention, bringing energy, bringing a level of drama that people can't look away from. But at the same time, they are raising a question. A serious one. How far does it go? Because there's a line. There always is. Between playing hard and going too far. Between intensity and risk. And right now, that line is getting thinner. Every game, every moment, every collision. And the league is walking it carefully. Because if it goes too far, there are consequences. But if it stays right on that edge, that's where the game becomes something unforgettable. And that's exactly where we are right now. On the edge. Watching. Waiting. To see what happens next. Because the truth is, we haven't seen the peak yet. We haven't seen the moment that fully defines this new era. But it's coming. You can feel it. Because moments like the one between Hull and Stewart, they don't just happen once. They build. They evolve. They lead to something bigger. A rematch. A response. A moment where everything boils over. And when that happens, it won't just be intense. It'll be historic. So now the real question isn't what happened. It's this. What happens next? Because the next time these two meet, something tells me, it won't just be basketball anymore. It'll be something the entire league is watching. Knowing that whatever happens could define the future of the WNBA. Now I want to hear from you, because this moment between Lexie Hull and Breanna Stewart wasn't just another play. It raised real questions about where the WNBA is headed. So tell me in the comments. White right pointing backhand index, was Hull right to step up like that and send a message? White right pointing backhand index, or was it just normal basketball intensity getting blown out of proportion? White right pointing backhand index, and where do you draw the line between playing tough and playing too far? Because right now, the league feels like it's at a turning point. Some fans are loving the added edge, the physicality, the emotion, the rivalries. Others are worried it could go too far and put players at risk. And honestly, both sides have a point. That's why your perspective matters. Also, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, because if this moment turns into a full-blown rivalry, you already know we're going to be covering every update, every rematch, and every reaction. And trust me, the next time these two teams meet, it won't just be another game. It'll be a statement. So stay locked in, because this story is still unfolding, and the next chapter might be even bigger.